or government. So what we're going to be looking at today is we're going to be examining and analyzing how most state constitutions are structured, and then also what exactly are local charters. So our essential question is, how do state constitutions and local charters structure government while also protecting individual rights? So before we actually get started, we are going to do a bell ringer. Okay, so on your document that you should have pulled up, you're going to see a section of it titled bell ringer. All right. So constitutions can vary from state to state, but they cannot conflict with the U.S. Constitution. So imagine for a second that your school or our school's discipline policies are like the U.S. Constitution, and maybe a teacher's expectations are like state constitutions. Okay, so keep that analogy in your head while you're answering these three questions. Okay, so our first question, so I want you to make a list of maybe just 3 rules that one of your teachers expects you to follow, where you go above and beyond the school rules. So maybe one of your teachers has a special rule that you don't have in any of your other classes. A good example, when I was in high school, one of my teachers only let us write in pen for our quizzes and our tests. All right. I also had some teachers who didn't let us chew gum. And then obviously I had some teachers that made us sit and assigned seating, and we never got to pick our seats in the class. Okay, so just 3 rules that one of your teachers expects you to follow that goes above and beyond school rules. Now, the second thing I want you to do is answer the question, do all of your teachers have the same classroom expectations? Okay, so if not, how do those expectations differ from one another? And then lastly, in your own opinion, why do teacher expectations often go above and beyond school rules, and why do we see rules differ from class to class? Okay, so you can go ahead, you can pause this video if you need to, so you can answer those questions, and then unpause it when you are ready to move on to notes. Alright, so like I said, we're going to be talking about 2 major things today, and that is state constitutions along with local charters. And let's start with the structure of state governments first, okay? So the U.S. is made up of 50 states as well as unincorporated, what we call territories or maybe commonwealths. Some examples could be the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, maybe Guam. Okay, so now while everyone lives under the U.S. Constitution, most people also live in a place where there's a state constitution or a local charter. Okay, and so living under a national constitution as well as a state constitution, it's just a fundamental aspect of political life here in America that basically every single American experiences. So let's look at the 3 branches in state and local government. So state constitutions, obviously, are going to create the structure of a state government. Now, like the federal constitution, every state constitution provides for those separation of powers, okay, those 3 branches of government. And again, like the national government, each branch has the ability to check the power of the others. All right, and state constitutions also get more into the nitty-gritty, where they outline the organization of each branch, the powers and terms of the various offices within that state, and then also the method of election for state officials. So let's first talk about the legislative branch in states, because I would argue that's the most important branch. All right, so here's a picture of the General Assembly here in Indiana. If you've never been, I highly recommend. It's a cool experience to go and see where our state laws are made and passed. And yeah, it's just cool. All right, so the legislative branch. All right, so state legislatures pass laws that deal with a lot of different things like health, crime, labor, education, transportation. And we've talked about this. They also have the power to tax and to spend that tax money. and then also, if need be, to borrow money. Okay, and in some areas like public welfare and public safety, state legislatures actually have more power than the U.S. Congress, because the U.S. Congress is limited in its role by the federal Constitution. Now, almost every single state has what we call a bicameral state legislature. So that just means we have two houses in Congress. All right, just like the U.S. Congress does. Now, the upper house is usually called the Senate, and then the lower house, it's either called the House of Representatives, but some states refer to it as the General Assembly, maybe the House of Delegates, Legislative Assembly, and 49 out of the 50 states use that bicameral legislature. There's only one state in the United States that has what we call a unicameral, or a one-chambered state legislature, and that state is Nebraska. So shout out to Nebraska, I guess, for being different. All right, let's talk about our next branch, and that's the executive branch. Okay, so if you don't know, Governor of Indiana, Governor Holcomb, he obviously is at the top of the executive branch, and here's a picture of him if you don't know what he looks like. All right, so the executive branch. So every state has an executive branch that's headed by a governor who has the power simply to carry out or to execute state laws. All right, that shouldn't be new. Okay, so the governor's responsibilities include proposing and signing legislation, budgeting, appointing officials, planning for economic growth, and basically just coordinating the work of executive departments. Now, the amount of control that a governor has over the executive branch really varies from state to state. But something that's kind of cool, so at the national level, when somebody is running for president, they choose their vice president. And then we vote for that person. And let's say that person wins. Well, the person who wins gets to pick who is going to surround them. All right. Now, it's different in a lot of states. In more than half of the states, for example, the people elect the governor, but then the people also elect the lieutenant governor. They also elect the attorney general, which is the state's top legal officer. And then they also will elect the secretary of state. All right. And that's very different. Okay. Because again, at the national level, we just vote for the president. And then the president is the one who really chooses the people around him or her. Okay, and again, in over half the states, it's not like that. People get to vote directly at who's in those quote-unquote power positions, which is pretty neat, I think, because it gives more power to the people, right? So governors will also try to obtain grants from the national government. That just means money for their state schools, their highways, urban areas. And then they will also represent their states when they want to try to cooperate with other states to get things done. Maybe let's build a new highway between Indiana and Illinois, and it will be good for Illinois and Indiana. Let's get it done. Okay. And more recently, governors have gone above and beyond this, and they will also start representing their states internationally. You know, for example, governors try to get foreign businesses to locate in their states. And the whole reason is so that they can get more money flowing through the state, and it helps out the economy of said state. Okay? And then one last tidbit on the executive branch for states. All state constitutions give governors the role of commander-in-chief over that state's National Guard. And the governor can use the National Guardsmen in their state simply to maintain law and order during state emergencies. So let's talk about our last branch, and that is the judicial branch. So this picture here is of the Indiana Supreme Court. You might notice there's only 5 people on it, compared to the federal government where we have 9 Supreme Court justices on it. Indiana only has 5. So, the judicial branch. Now, like the U.S. Constitution, state constitutions establish courts to simply uphold and interpret state laws. And those courts help resolve conflicts such as business disagreements, maybe grievances that citizens have against one another, and then obviously state courts excuse me, are going to punish criminals who violate state laws. All right, now, as the basic law of the state, right, the state constitution is supreme in that state, and it's going to trump all other laws made within the state. However, at the same time, the state constitution cannot contain anything within it that clashes with our United States Constitution. You'll remember that's because of the Supremacy Clause found in Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution. So if a federal court decides that a provision or maybe an amendment that's made to a state's constitution is in conflict with our federal constitution, that provision or that amendment, it must be removed, okay, because it violates that Supremacy Clause. All right, so let's look now at local government and local charters. All right, so here is a picture of the quote-unquote government of Shelbyville, Indiana. If you did not know, they actually have a Facebook. Let's see if I can go find it really quick. They actually have a Facebook where you can watch their proceedings live, and it's pretty cool. I'm going to pull it up really quick so you guys can see it on your screens. Okay, let me drag this over, maybe. Okay, here we go. Drag it over. So the city of Shelbyville has its own Facebook page, which is pretty interesting. And like I said, they have, you can watch them discuss things live. You can interact. If you did not know about this, it's pretty cool. Maybe check it out in your free time. But yeah. Alright, let's get this back over. Let's exit out of here. Alright, so let's look at local governments and charters. Okay, so although the U.S. has a very strong tradition of local self-government, local governments exist only if a state constitution creates them and gives them local authority. And we talked about this with federalism. Okay, so state constitutions are going to establish different types of local government, and it's usually based on their size and population. The government of Shelbyville, Indiana, is going to look maybe different from the government of, say, Knightstown, Indiana. Okay, it's just not going to be the same. So state constitutions might create cities, maybe they'll create a county, a township, and then they're also going to define the organization, the powers, and the duties of that local government. And state constitutions, they're going to regulate the ways that the local governments can raise and spend money. And in many states, the state constitution actually limits the taxing power of local governments by creating rules about, how much they can tax and then how much of those taxes can be spent or must be spent. So state government might, for example, assume control over a local school district that's in financial trouble. So with local charters, now charters are documents that state governments issue to local governments. And so a charter is going to grant the community a legal status, and it allows it to have a separate local government. And charters specify the type of government the community is going to have. It's going to specify the powers and responsibilities and the procedures for electing officials to the local government. And most charters are going to establish, again, 3 branches of local government. Along with the powers and duties of each branch, charters usually contain a Bill of Rights, which can include protections for people. And a charter cannot contain fewer rights than the state and national constitution. So, for example, the charter for Montgomery County, Maryland, gives firefighters the right to a union, although the state of Maryland doesn't necessarily provide this right. So following, the logic of national supremacy, local charters and local laws passed by, local legislatures, again, cannot conflict with state constitutions, and they can also not come into conflict with the United States Constitution. Alright guys, so we looked at a bunch of stuff here in 15 minutes. If you have any questions, you can send me an email, or maybe, I guess for the sake of this activity, raise your hand in class and ask me. But if not, I'll see you later, and you can go ahead and get started on the next part of this activity for our e-learning exercise. See ya.